So this video is going to be a little bit of a shorter video. I just kind of want to walk you through how I set up reCAPTCHA v3 on my newsletter app. Now, if you don't know what reCAPTCHA is or what Captcha is, basically there are bots, or people can write bots that basically hit your API over and over again with various things. And one example, actually, I think someone on my Discord channel actually just had this issue like yesterday, which is what triggered me to add reCAPTCHA, is that they have a sign up form or something, and there's a bot that's hitting their endpoint thousands of times a second, flooding their database with fake emails. So when that happens, like potentially my newsletter that I'm working on, like how would I send out emails to a bunch of bogus emails? Because that would look bad for my brand. It would look bad for AWS SES. They'd probably end up blocking me for spamming a bunch of people who didn't actually subscribe to this. So you kind of have to figure out ways to combat bots and spam, unfortunately, because that's just the world we live in, of people who are just malicious. But reCAPTCHA is one approach you can take. You could also do like rate limiting on your API. You could do some type of like IP limiting if you want. But I mean, you can spoof IP, so it's not really always the best approach. So reCAPTCHA is something that's provided by Google and you set up on your UI. And I haven't looked too much into like how it works under the hood. I believe it just kind of tracks things on the browser and the way the user interacts with your page. And by doing so, they can kind of set up some type of profile to know if this user is a real user or if they're like a bot, right? A bot might not even do anything other than just come click this, fill it in, and click submit. Or if they're doing an API request directly to the backend, that won't work because you need a reCAPTCHA ID. So how exactly did I set this up? How does this work? I'm using Next for this application. And to get that going, I downloaded this package, Next reCAPTCHA v3. Kind of hesitant about using this because it's kind of like not really used. It doesn't really have that many downloads and stuff, but the code's so minimal that you can just look through the repo and grab what you need anyway. But to set it up, you basically add this to your Next environment variables, and you basically wrap whatever page you need with this. So if I take you to a page real quick, so let me show you. I have a page here called index. That's the main page that you saw in the browser when I had it opened. And down at the bottom, I'm basically just wrapping the home page with this reCAPTCHA provider. And if you don't provide it any properties, it'll just read your environment variables and get the key set up. And those keys are put into my .env file right now. I'm not going to open that up. But when you go and you sign up for reCAPTCHA, there's like an admin panel dashboard. You basically enter in your site information. You have to add like localhost and your actual domain name to the allowed lists. Click create, and they give you two keys. They give you a public key and a private key. The private key you never want to expose, so you keep that on your API. And the public key you're going to put on your UI. And that public key is basically used to communicate with reCAPTCHA, the generated token. And your token has to be sent from your backend along with the secret key. And I'll show you that. So using that Next provider, I wrap my home page. And you have the ability to use a used reCAPTCHA hook here that allows you to do execute reCAPTCHA. So all I'm doing is when someone submits that subscribe form, I call the method, and this is just like some metadata you can provide it to kind of keep track of what called the reCAPTCHA. But you call this and you get back a token. Okay, so the token is what we use on our API to verify that, hey, the user making this request, they're actually not a bot. So I'm sending the email that the user typed into the form and the token to my backend. And let's look at how the backend works. I'm using Express for my backend, and this is the endpoint that basically takes in that email in the token. But this approach can apply to if you're using like a Next API endpoint, or if you're using like Go or Ruby. It's the same principle. Basically, you take the token and you take your reCAPTCHA secret that I talked about earlier, and you need to make an HTTP request to this reCAPTCHA/API/site verify. And you need to post the data in this format where you pass the secret and the response. And this is going to return you an object that basically is going to say if it was successfully validated or if it wasn't, right? So I'm just saying if JSON.success is not there, if it's false, throw an error. There's a little bit more to this because I do believe they return you something called a score, which is going to be a numeric between 0 and 1. And if someone has a score of 0, there's a high chance that they're a bot or they're someone bad or malicious. If they have a score of 1, that means they're probably a user that's used your application before and they have a good profile and they seem like responsible people. So in the docs, they say you don't have to worry about the score yet. Like you can let this run on your application and then kind of view your analytics and see like what score should you kind of look for. They also say you can default it to just if it's below 0.5, just throw an error or something. I haven't really looked too much more into that, so I'm not going to set that up yet. But basically, I have this function that I call. So if the reCAPTCHA verification fails, I just throw an error back to the user, and I can kind of show that error in the UI, right? And that's kind of how I set it up. This actually took a lot longer to figure out and set up than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a 10-minute thing. Ended up being like 2 hours because I started with like a different React library, and that one didn't work because of strict mode. And then I found this next library, I started using it, but it wasn't working for my setup because I actually had the V2 version of reCAPTCHA, and this needs the V3. So this has just been a big pain, but I think now, hopefully, if I have this all set up correctly, which I don't know if I even do, then I shouldn't have to worry as much if like people try to spam my API with fake email addresses. And then also what's kind of confusing is that their docs, this kind of frustrated me. I'm just kind of venting my frustrations. If you go to their docs, nowhere in this thing do they tell you what type of post request to make. Like what header should you make? It just says do a post here with this data. Okay. So I think this is assuming you're using like an actual HTML5 form, but I had to figure this header stuff out. I think I actually asked like ChatGPT to just give me the solution because I kind of got frustrated. But you have to basically set the content type to be a form URL encoded, ask in the body like that, and that's how you work with that API. Why didn't they say that here? Why did they not give you a good example? I don't know. But that's kind of the overview. Hopefully, if you're trying to set up some type of form and you don't want bots to potentially spam your API, then make sure you set up reCAPTCHA or some other type of bot validation logic. Now, another thing I added just in case was I wasn't storing the timestamp of when these subscribers would subscribe. So before, it's just a bunch of data in my database that had no timestamps. What you might want to do is you want to make sure those timestamps are there because a bot might come in and just like flood your database at a certain time period. And you want to be able to kind of go through all your old subscription emails and figure out like at what point did this bot kind of flood your API. And I think there's ways to set up alerts and various metrics and stuff to kind of tell you when stuff is going wrong. And reCAPTCHA has an option to kind of send you an email if they notice some suspicious activity. So then you can use that to go back to your database, find all the entries that were within a certain time frame, and just delete them all if you don't want that fake data into your database. But that's all I kind of wanted to talk about. If you enjoyed watching this, give me a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, press the bell icon. And like always, feel free to join my Discord if you want to talk to me directly or just find other people to talk to about code. And I have a newsletter that you can subscribe to if you want to just get little tips and tricks every week about coding and whatever else. Have a good day and happy coding.